Well, speaking of heaven, as Danielle Crase and reminded us that my mom is enjoying her first days and her first week in heaven. It's not hard to think about heaven these days. In fact, sometimes you question and wonder, am I thinking too much about heaven? And am I too heavenly minded to be of any good down here? And I want to look at that today and answer that question by saying, no, you can't overdo it. You can't be too heavenly minded. Last week we talked about hell, because we're talking about eternity and possible destinations. And I think there are two things that Satan does not want us to think about. He doesn't want us to think about hell and the horrors of hell. And he doesn't want us to think about heaven, to get too excited about it. So, and there's reasons for that. We're going to look at that today as to why we should keep our minds on heaven. And I just want to start out by saying, the next slide, Jesse. Part of what I feel anyway is I just call it homesickness. And for all those years on the mission field, we spent 12 years away from home, long ways from home in different countries. And that was probably one of the hardest things, was the feelings of homesickness. You never got over it. You did learn, to live and got over the cultural adjustments and learned how to thrive. And yet, maybe it was just me. Maybe I'm just not good missionary material. I just could never get over the homesickness. And then we came home, and we've been living here in Michigan now for 7 years, and it's not just home to the United States, we're home where I grew up, with my family and right here in my home church. And so surely I shouldn't feel homesick anymore, right? Well, I still do. And what is that? I don't know what else to call it. It's the only way I can describe this emotion is some homesickness. And I'm sure, I know this is what it is. It's being homesick for a place I've never been yet. Isn't that strange? Not when you think about it, because I believe God has put that homesickness in everybody. That's why Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes, God has set eternity in the hearts of men, in the hearts of people. We all have this deep longing for eternal things. We think about them. We're the only animal on the planet that contemplates our own existence and the possibility of life after death. And why do we do that? Because God put it in our hearts to think about it. And so we do. We have this longing, and it's a natural desire that God has put in us for eternal things, for things that will last beyond our death. I mean, we all think about, is anybody going to remember me later? And of course, now that my mom has passed, I think about things like that too, and the legacy and the heritage that she has left behind, and to be remembered. We want those things. We have a desire for things that are not quite right in our world, right? I think there's something about our world that just makes us long for something better. We get disillusioned with life here. We get disillusioned with our government. Are you anybody like that with me? You get disillusioned with your government, with our president, with our legislators, and their systems, and you just think, there's got to be something better than this. And then you also get this, I'll just be honest, I get this desire to rest, I mean, more than just going on vacation. You do need that. You need your rest and relaxation. You need a day off every week. But there's still within me that something says, I just can't wait to get to heaven where we can just finally rest. And that's what the book of Hebrews talks about this. We enter into this eternal Sabbath rest. I'm looking forward to that. I'm homesick for that, for an unending vacation. But I know sometimes it sounds boring, but we'll get to that in a minute. But it's a good thing. So, why should we keep thinking about these things? Well, Paul told us to set our minds there, to put our hearts and our minds on heavenly things. So we're going to look at Colossians chapter 3, starting with verse 1. I'm going to read off 11 verses, this section. But he starts out in verse 1, says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above." You can't think about it too much, right? Set your hearts there where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways, in the life you once lived, but now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge and the image of its Creator. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian or Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. So Paul said to the Colossians, set your minds above on eternal things. You can't be too heavenly minded. So why would he say that? I mean, come on, we were going to get there eventually anyway, so why make yourself more homesick? You know, that was one of my strategies for dealing with homesickness back in Mexico, is just don't think about it too much. But Paul says, yeah, go ahead. Think about it. Set your minds there. Put your hearts on heaven. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing.
Maybe because if you're setting your mind on heaven, you're not constantly thinking about earthly things that hold us down.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's my number one point. That's what I think Paul's first point was, his first idea. To set your mind on things above and not on earthly things. That's what he said in verse 2. So yeah, next slide, Jesse. Here's why. Why do we think about heaven? To change our perspective. To get our eyes off this world, which is so distracting, isn't it? It's so hard to really get your eyes and your mind and your heart off of these things, because that's what's right around us and that's what feels real. And we think this is sometimes all there is, but it isn't, because eventually we will go on.
Go somewhere, you don't dare go there first.
Yeah, the destination is what really matters. So we're all going to die, right? It's one of my favorite quotes from a movie. We're all gonna die. What movie was that? And Atlantis, yeah. One of the kids' movies, she says that a couple times. We're all gonna die. Well, it's true. Human beings have a 100% mortality rate. They all die. In all of history, there's only been 2 men who never died: Enoch and Elijah. And Jesus died and he rose again and ascended, so he would count as maybe the 3rd person, but he even died. So, given the fact that it's nearly 100%, we can pretty much count on the fact that we someday are going to die. And that's not always a bad thing. Okay, it just reminds me this week, my mom died And I've been telling everybody all week long, I feel sad, I feel the grief, the loss, but at the same time, it's hard to just be there, because it's such joy, it's just such a blessing, and we know she's in heaven. She is finally there.
That's what helped me with my dad and me.
Yeah. The destination is really more important than the journey. And sometimes we say it the other way around, don't we? Don't get destination disease, and we yell at our kids when they say, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" And we say, "Shut up and enjoy the ride." And that's kind of what our world tries to tell us. Stop thinking about getting there. Just think about your journey right now. Don't think ahead. Well, I think the kids have it right. The destination is more important than the journey, in fact. We're supposed to feel this way. We're supposed to feel like kids do in the car. We're supposed to be a little anxious. We're supposed to be restless. And so Paul is saying here, set your mind on things above and on the destination. In fact, the word that he uses, the set your minds in verse 2, is actually just one word in Greek. It's the word that we use, it's part of the root for the word for reins, as in reins on a horse, because it talks about what controls your head. And so, because of that was the word that they used to talk about a reins on a horse, it eventually became the word for mind and head. And so Paul says, set your mind on things above. In other words, what he's saying is be controlled in your thinking, not by the things of this world, but by the next world, and by our destination. So, does that mean we should all quit our jobs? Does that mean we should quit worrying about making money? Does that mean we should quit planning for retirement? Aren't those just earthly things? No, we still have to do those things, don't we? We still have to live here. We still have to go to work. We still have to plan for the next, generation, how many years? Yeah. I mean, I still think about retirement too, because I want to, if the Lord tarries and I live long enough, we've got to make plans. But here's the difference. Paul says, don't be controlled by those things. That's not what's guiding your head. Your head should be controlled and guided by the destination, by heaven. That's what our thinking is supposed to always be about, to be controlling our thoughts and our hearts and our desires. And it gives us an eternal perspective. I mean, Danielle, you nailed it. That's exactly what Paul is trying to say. Think about heaven so you're not controlled by the things of this earth. And that you always have this eternal perspective. To me, that just is so important for just life. Otherwise, it would be kind of depressing, wouldn't it? I think if this is all there is, you die like any other animal, and in 100 years you're totally forgotten, then there's nothing. So I kind of like having an eternal perspective and to be thinking about things that last for eternity, and keep my mind on those things and on my destination. I'm going to get to heaven, and that's what I want to do. I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. So that's one reason to keep your mind on heaven, is to keep your eyes off the earth. The second thing, look at the next one, Jesse, is to change our actions. It really does change the way we live if we are thinking heaven. In fact, Paul puts this great big therefore in verse 5. Therefore, if your minds are on heaven, if your heart is on heaven, and your whole destination is moving in that direction, that should change your life. Therefore, you don't live like you used to live. Paul begins to talk about death. This life on earth, compared to our longing for heaven and our destination, is like being dead. And so Paul says, go ahead, put it to death. Put to death the things that will keep you from getting to heaven. The things that will destroy your relationship with God. Things that get between us and God. The idolatry that he specifically mentions. He gives a big long list of things. Sexual immorality, lust, greed, idolatry, anger, malice, slander, language, and lying. Those are all things on his list, and then you can see there's some other things up there too. And these are all tied to your longing and your desire for heaven. So you don't just get rid of those things because you're not good and you should be a better person, and so I'll try to do better. No, that's really not the motivation. The motivation is I want to get to heaven. So therefore, I'm going to put to death, or let God put to death in me, all these things that are tied to my earthly nature, to a sinful nature. And again, I think Satan does not want us to think about this. He does not want us to be continuing to think about our eternal destination, because the more you think about that, the more you long for it, and you build that homesickness. And so you say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there, including changing my life and changing my lifestyle and my actions. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, is there anything in my life that I desire more than heaven? Are there things that I have more of a priority in my life than heaven? And if so, that becomes an idol. And that comes between you and God. Is there anything I'm not willing to give up? Should I start stepping on some toes? I won't get too bad today. But think about it. Is there something that God's put his finger on and says, let's think about heaven? And that is coming between you and me. And so, is there anything that you desire more than heaven? And God himself. That can be an idol. So Paul says we gotta actually die to those things. You are dead. You are dead in Christ. So your life is actually in heaven. And Paul says that in verse 3. You are seated now with Christ. You are not living here anymore. So now it's time to start acting like it. Changing your actions and the way that you live. Okay, next one. I've got 4 points. I'm kind of hurrying a little bit today. So I never have 4 points. I only have 3, right? Well, this time I was looking through this and I thought, I tried to make 2 things into 1 and it didn't work really good. So I'm going to have 4 points. Because this is the 3rd one, and I really think this is important. Why should we keep our hearts and our minds on heaven? Well, it helps us to change our attitude about heaven. And once again, I think Satan wants to distort our image of heaven. He wants to know the truth about heaven. He doesn't want us to think too much about the reality of heaven. And he does it on both ends. Like, he doesn't want us to think about the horrors of hell. So he kind of keeps us distracted from that. But he doesn't want us to think about how great heaven is going to be. How wonderful, what a good thing it is. In fact, I have to be honest, even when I was a kid and thinking about heaven, it didn't really sound that great. because it was eternity, which again, it's hard for a kid to wrap his mind around eternity. It's hard for us as adults. Forever, eternity. And what will you do in heaven for eternity? Whatever God tells us to, okay? But I always got the impression, and you even hear it in church, and you hear it taught, that we will spend eternity worshiping around the throne of God. Now, when you're a kid, 12 years old or so,
it's like spending eternity in church.
That's exactly right. Who wants to go to church for eternity? That was the image that I got. And when I was in church as a kid, I was like, oh, come on, will this ever be over? Come on, let's go, let's get to the end. And even adults we're like that today, aren't we? And if I go too long preaching today, everybody's going to feel that anxiousness. And so when you kind of put that on your idea of heaven, you think, oh, great, goodness, who wants to do that? Forever. It reminds me of that Far Side cartoon. I had seen that a long time ago, and it just cracked me up. And I thought, that's exactly how I felt. This guy sitting on a cloud thinking, I wish I'd brought a magazine. Because it just seems like it's going to be boring. Forever doing nothing but sitting on clouds or worshiping around the throne. Well, we need to change our thinking a little bit, because that's not what the Bible teaches, for one thing. I read a really good book a long time ago, about 10 years ago, written by Randy Alcorn. And the title of the book is Heaven. So if you ever get a chance to read it, to pull it out, I can't remember where it is now. I probably loaned it to somebody and it's gone. But he talked about this whole issue about how we think heaven is going to be this cloudy, spiritual, ethereal, what are those words? I can't think of all of them. That it's just going to be like, not real. We're just going to be floating around in this non-physical existence. But what the Bible actually describes is a very physical existence. In fact, when we're talking about after the resurrection, when God creates a new heaven and a new earth, and heaven in the book of Revelation actually descends down to earth as a city on earth. And we're supposed to live there in a very physical existence. We'll have resurrected bodies. We will eat. Isn't that good news? Yeah. There'll be food in heaven. There's all kinds of things. In fact, Randy in his book points out the fact that it is true that we will be worshiping for eternity, but the fact is that everything we do in heaven is going to be worship. And it's not going to be a church service that doesn't end. When we were in Mexico, I thought some of those church services would never end. We would stand and sing for 45 minutes before the sermon started, which lasted an hour. So, a typical service in Mexico is 2 hours long, and it just seemed like an eternity. Well, in heaven, we're going to be busy doing things. And Randy in his book suggests that we are going to be doing things like we are doing here on earth. We'll be exploring, building, learning, practicing, doing, singing, doing music. I can't wait to get to heaven. I can actually play those drums for real and not just be messing around. See if I can do it right. We'll be doing those things, and we'll have an eternity to do them. In fact, heaven is going to be the most incredible existence that you can even imagine. What is the best thing you can imagine? What would you do for eternity if you could think of something that's like that you enjoy here on earth? I remember my dad would try to explain that to us as kids. He would say, okay, think of the thing or the activity that you enjoy the most, that just is just the funnest thing ever, and then multiply that by 1,000. And that's kind of what heaven's going to be like, only better. So you just can't even wrap your mind around things like that. And according to this book by Randy Alcorn, he says it's not outside the possibilities that we will be exploring our galaxy. And that's, to me, that would be like the ultimate existence, to be like Star Trek. Yeah? Yeah, Jesse's with me, aren't you, Jesse? To have a faster than light spaceship that explores the galaxy, and just we could spend eternity doing that. And maybe go on to other galaxies, and it probably doesn't thrill you guys, but just to me, that would be heaven. And heaven's going to be like that or better. And so we need to get excited about heaven. We need to think of heaven in real terms. Not this cloudy, boring existence, but what it's really going to be like. And again, the more we get excited about heaven, the more we want to get there, and the more we want everybody else to get there with us. Because I do think heaven is going to be about relationships. It's going to be that great reunion, family and friends that we know and love here on earth. And I know Mom is up there waiting for the rest of us. And it will be this great family reunion. And then not only my family, but your family. And so we'll all get together. And so it's going to be good. It's going to be great. And we want to get as many people there with us as possible. So I think of that as my life mission, my life purpose. If I had to write it down, and I've done this before, what is your purpose in life? To get to heaven and to take as many people with me as possible. Because that's what heaven's going to be like. It's about relationships. Okay, I don't want to get too distracted on that because that's a fun thing to talk about. And then you can get off on all kinds of tangents like, are your pets going to be there? And will you know your spouse? Or will you be married in heaven? And things like that. I don't know all those answers because the Bible doesn't tell us clearly. But the last thing I want to talk about is that we need to change our investment strategy. As we think about heaven, and our purpose in life is to get there, we're going to find out that it changes our actions, it changes our attitudes, and it changes what we invest in. And I'm not just talking money, I'm talking your time and talents and your whole life. What do you invest in? Because we keep hearing this, and that's why I started it at the beginning. Can you be too heavenly minded? And there used to be a saying, maybe we haven't heard it lately, but he's so heavenly minded, he's no earthly good. Right? Well, that really shouldn't be true. You can't be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good, because if that's the truth, you're not thinking right. Because there is a form of religion or religiosity, some kind of a legalistic, circle the wagons and let's get in our spiritual bomb shelters and who cares what's going on in the rest of the world. And in a way, you can say, yeah, those people are so heavenly minded, they're no earthly good because they never do anything outside the church. But in reality, if your mind is fixed on heaven, you are going to be more good here on earth. You will do more good. And you should, anyway. It should change your whole strategy, is how you invest your time and how you invest your life and even how you invest your money. Again, C.S. Lewis, okay? And I'm on a C.S. Lewis kick, and this whole month that we've been talking about these eternal things, and C.S. Lewis always has a good thing to say. So he said, if you read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were just those who thought the most of the next. And then it goes on from there. It talks about the apostles who converted the whole Roman Empire, the English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade. All of them left their marks on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It's since Christians have stopped thinking of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this world. And then he says one of my favorite quotes. I should have put it up there too, but I didn't. He says, if you aim at heaven, you will get earth thrown in. But if you aim at earth, you will get neither. That's pretty good, isn't it? That's what we mean by setting our minds on heaven, not just to totally check out from earth, from our activities here, but rather the opposite. If we are thinking about heaven and getting ourselves and everybody else there, then we're going to be busy here on earth, doing good, reaching the lost, doing acts of mercy and help. It's no wonder that Jesus kept saying over and over, give, give, give. Give up your time and your talents and also your money. Because whatever you invest in the kingdom is what's going to last forever. So it changes your whole investment strategy. So that's why, at least 4 reasons why you should think about heaven, and you can't overdo it. You can't be too heavenly minded. You can't be too homesick. It's a good thing to be a little bit restless. Look at it. Here, the next slide, Jesse. Here's the conclusion. These are the 4 things that we change by putting our minds and our hearts on heaven. It changes our perspective, gets our eyes off this world, changes our actions because we realize that whatever we do here matters, our actions. And it changes our attitude, that we really want to get people to heaven and we want to get there too. And it changes our investment strategy so that we can store up our treasures in heaven. Any questions? Comments? You're a small group today, so you get through a little bit faster. All right, let's stand together and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we love to think about heaven, and that's a good thing. And Paul has reminded us and commanded us to do this, to set our minds there, set our hearts there. And we do need to do this. Sometimes it's a discipline, Lord, to get our minds off this world and to realize that this is not all there is. This is not our home. This is not our destiny. Our destination is an eternal one with you. So keep us in that perspective and help us to adjust our lives and change our lives so that we will get to heaven and to get rid of everything that comes between us and you, and to get excited about heaven and all the good things that we'll enjoy, and to get everybody else there too. Lord, as we go from this place, remind us that we are on this earth for a reason. We're not just twiddling our thumbs until we finally get to heaven, but you have called us to invest in your kingdom starting right now. And so, Lord, the more we think about heaven and the more we think about eternity, the more we're going to be willing to do that and to change our whole perspective on life. So again, fill us with your Holy Spirit and send us out of here with your power, your goodness, your mercy, and your love. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.